All right, what's on tap for 49ers and Seahawks? To help us talk through this, we got our good friend Danny Kelly in the building. Danny Kelly of the Ringer Fantasy Football Show, Ringer NFL Draft Show. That's on the same feed. So if you subscribe to one, you subscribe to both. Avid Seahawks fan, Danny. Thanks for hopping in, man. I like talking football with you. I particularly like talking Niners Seahawks with you.
Yeah, usually it's a little bit better, more evenly matched game, I think, generally speaking, over the last 10 years. But yes, it is fun nonetheless. Not as fun for me. Probably more fun for you.
That's the thing, is it feels like there was the 2011, 12, and 13 years where they were really close.
Yeah.
And then the Seahawks just took off while the Niners fell off. And then they were really close in 19 and not so much 20 for the Niners in 21. And now it feels like San Francisco is just way better.
Yeah,
it's a weird rivalry.
Yeah, I thought there was a while there where I thought the narrative that Pete Carroll kind of has Shanahan's number was a thing, but then I think it was more just like the Seahawks had better talent, which is probably, generally speaking, a thing in the NFL. It's like, the Jimmies and Joes versus X's and O's thing. Like, usually players are the ones that are winning the games, but man, Shanahan is obviously a extremely, extremely good schemer. Like, this offense is scary good. And the way that he kind of schemes up his really talented players is super intimidating as a Seahawks fan. Not looking forward to it.
So I'm curious what you think about the Seahawks season from a big picture standpoint, because they started off 5-2. They've lost 3 in a row and 4 of 5. Do you think this is a team that's pretty emblematic of its record? Do you think it's better or worse than 6-6? Where are you at on this year's Seahawks so far?
I would say probably slightly better. I consider them a pretty good team that's clearly well below, like a tier or two below, like the elite teams in the NFL, if that makes any sense. Like, they're frisky. I think that they, especially on offense, when they can get things going, they can really put up points. They can do some really exciting things with, I think Geno is still a good quarterback. Obviously, I think people and Seahawks fans in general are kind of split on him. I'm still a big believer in him as, again, it's kind of like the way I feel about the Seahawks, not necessarily an elite quarterback, but like a guy you can win with. And I think the Seahawks have a lot of good skill players. They're young at a lot of spots as like receiver, but generally they're clearly, like, when you watch them compared to the Cowboys, the Eagles, and especially the 49ers, I'm like, yeah, they're not on the same level as this team. Like, maybe if you play X amount of games, they can pull out a couple wins. Anything goes in the NFL, but clearly a step below the elite teams in the NFC.
I was fascinated because the Seahawks played the Niners on Thanksgiving, and their offense looked, inept feels strong, but that's just kind of how it looked on no, that's how it looked that night, right?
Just flaccid. Yeah.
That's way worse.
Sorry, yeah. I was trying to think of like the most insulting. Inept is pretty bad, but yeah.
You described something as flaccid, like that's the worst thing it can be. There's nothing worse.
Just impotent.
All right. But enough about Pete Carroll. Am I right?
Oh.
No. Wow. No. Okay. That was wow. That was rude. All right. On track. Seahawks offense, Niners. They scored 6 points on offense against the 49ers on Thanksgiving, and then they go out against Dallas and hang up 35. What's the difference? Because Dallas's defense is really, really good as well. What was the difference to you in those two games?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, that is the question. We don't know. No, I don't think anyone really expected the Seahawks to just have this explosion game against the Cowboys, but they did.
Yeah.
I honestly, like, as simple as it is, I think a couple of players played way, way better than they did in the previous game, especially Geno Smith and DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf had like the game of his career against the Cowboys, and I think that was a huge difference. That was a huge boost for them, clearly. And DK had been in a pretty big slump, I think, if you go back a few games before that. And like, not to like just simplify it too much, but a lot of times it's just like matchups, individual matchups, the way things work for different teams. And again, like I said, I think Geno played way, way better in that Cowboys game. He was really dialed in. The pressure wasn't affecting him quite as much. The Seahawks, managed to get a couple like big plays on screens, which is really rare for them. It's like, I don't know. It was just one of those games where things clicked for them offensively. Obviously, defensively, they were terrible. Gave up 41 points, but yeah, I think, that is the only thing that's given me some hope for this weekend, is that maybe Geno Smith is just really locked in right now. We got DK Metcalf playing confidently, and maybe they can like make it a good game. Maybe they can make it a bit of a shootout, but I think that's just really the big difference there.
Do you think Geno Smith is still sort of auditioning to be the Seahawks' long-term answer? Like, what do you make of just his standing with the team? He's 33. It
Yeah.
seems like his play has dipped a little bit from last year when he was obviously really important. The Seahawks making the playoffs. Just where is he at big picture with the Seahawks? And are they going to get a quarterback in next year's draft, do you think?
Yeah. So Brady Henderson from ESPN wrote an article for ESPN right before the Cowboys game. And essentially in that, he was reporting some things that would basically like this was a bit of a audition for him. Obviously, he had some struggles, particularly in turning the football over. Even if you go back to last year, Geno had, I think, like his turnover worthy play rate and his turnover worthy plays were really high. He just kind of got lucky, like some drop picks here and there. And that certainly helped like his bottom line in terms of his statistics. But this is kind of who Geno has been throughout his whole career. Obviously, he's been a lot better lately than he was early in his career, but he's a risk taker. He's very aggressive. He believes in himself. He trusts his own arm. And so sometimes that can get him in trouble. And I would say that's the one thing that worries me in terms of long term with Pete Carroll. If you're a type of guy that's going to have a lot of turnovers, like that marriage typically won't work with Pete Carroll, because Carroll's whole mantra, his whole philosophy centers around it's all about the ball, taking care of the football. And so that would be the one thing that kind of like makes me pump the brakes a little bit about calling Geno a quote unquote like franchise quarterback. I think he's a high level bridge quarterback. And bridge quarterback has like a negative connotation. I'm not trying to be like a pejorative there, use it in that way. Because he's, like I said, he's a guy that you can win with. But I don't think he is the type of player that's going to keep the Seahawks from continuing to like scout quarterbacks and potentially draft quarterback, if that makes sense. So, I mean, there was really strong rumors and some reporting that the Seahawks were going to take Anthony Richardson if he was there. When I think the Seahawks picked at 5, and obviously Richardson was gone, so it was a moot point, and they didn't take him. But that would have been a very interesting scenario and situation that would have happened. They didn't end up doing it, but I think if they're not going to pick that high this next year, but if they do find themselves in a situation where they can draft a quarterback, I don't think they're necessarily going to shy away from it, if that makes sense. I think that, and that's always been sort of their philosophy. Even when they had Russell Wilson, is like they were still willing to like talk about other quarterbacks and scout other quarterbacks. They didn't really do it a lot because it just didn't really work out that way. But I do think they've always kind of had that philosophy where you never get satisfied with what you have at quarterback and kind of just keep, especially now in this day and age, like with the way that quarterbacks get hurt, concussion rules, and how a lot of times these guys miss multiple games when you get a concussion. It always helps to have a really good backup. They traded for Drew Lock when they traded Russell Wilson. He's still around. So long story short, long way of saying I don't think that they're like taking themselves out of the running for any quarterbacks.
So just while we're on the topic of quarterbacks, you guys talked about this on the Ringer Fantasy Football Show. You talked about Brock Purdy. And I thought you had the take of everything. The whole thing exists in a gray area that is massive between the two extremes of he's awful, actually, and he's a top 5 quarterback.
Right.
And what are your just kind of general thoughts on what you're seeing from Brock Purdy?
Yeah, I'm always kind of like, hey, there's plenty of room over here in this gray area. Come over here and live in the gray area. Like, I think we can obviously be very impressed with what he's done. I mean, I think he's been much, much better than anyone expected him to be, clearly, in the NFL since he was the last pick of the draft. And I've been very impressed with his decision making for the most part. Obviously his ability to run this offense exactly, or not exactly, but very close to exactly how Shanahan wants it to be run. Plays on time, does a little scrambling. His statistics are extremely, extremely good. I don't think he's necessarily like exactly what his statistics say he is, because I think he's in a situation. This is something I was saying even before the season. Like, he has maybe one of the best groups of skill players the NFL has ever collected. Any team has collected, and obviously he's got a. So he's got the advantage of playing in that. Plus Shanahan, even going through the years, like Shanahan's quarterbacks have always had elevated like yards per attempt numbers, just because he's such a good schemer. So obviously there's like variables, but this is the gray area that we live in. I think we can say he's a very good quarterback without saying he is a top 5 quarterback. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so drop him into any other offense, I'd be very interested to see if people still thought he was a top 5 offense. But the reality is he's playing in this 49ers offense. He's really good for them. And you could say you could make the same argument for a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL. Jalen Hurts, for instance. So I don't know. I kind of fall in the middle of it. I was sort of resistant to the idea for a long time, but it was probably just because I was grounded to the idea that he was like, the last pick in the draft, and he doesn't have any, like, I would say, outstanding physical traits that makes you think he's this elite guy. But he's just like, the numbers are incredible, and he's like running this offense really, really efficiently, and you can't deny that.
Is Pete Carroll ever going to retire? Is he just going to coach forever?
He's older than Mike Shanahan. That's nuts to me, dude.
I mean, Mike looks old too.
He looks awful.
You know how like some guys like retire and it's like, oh, they need to take a little bit better care of themselves. Like, I look at, like, if you ever see Brett Favre, man, he looks like he's living a rough life these days. But
it's probably karma playing a big part.
Yeah. That's what happens when the charity money dries up.
And whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Carroll, man, he looks incredible for what is he, like 73 years old or something like that? He's the oldest coach in the NFL. He's even older than Belichick, which is wild. I don't think he's going to retire anytime soon. I think he's one of those people that he really enjoys the job. He really enjoys the grind, and he's a program builder. It's like in his DNA to like do this. He's a teacher. His philosophy is just go, go, go. He's got more energy than I do. And, he's like 30 something years older than me. So, I don't see him retiring anytime soon, to be honest.
That's wild.
It's just interesting because it's like, at some point, I don't know if the Seahawks have been rebuilding. I don't think that's the right way to put it since Russell Wilson was traded. But like, at some point, if they do end up getting another young quarterback, it will feel like a rebuild. And if you're, 73, 74, a 74-year-old head coach, like, how much bandwidth can you have for that? Or is it just going to be a scenario where like the defense is going to be able to punch above its weight because it's well coached, and they'll just be competitive, and Pete's cool with just being competitive? Like, I think
it's exactly what you just said. They'll be competitive, and Pete will be cool with them being competitive. I think if you look at like the history of Pete Carroll in Seattle, there's been like 3 years, I think, that they've gone under 500. He's just like been very, very consistent in churning out competitive teams. And I think that's the word you'd use, competitive. Like, not necessarily the best team in the NFL, but they can punch above their weight in a lot of cases, because they drag teams down, into the mud, and they slow it down. They try to control the ball and not turn it over, all that stuff that he preaches. I'd say that his defenses the last 5-6 years have not been very good. So I think that there is some skepticism that if they did have to restart on offense and they had a rookie quarterback in there, that it would look good because their defense could hold up their end of the bargain. I don't think that's really been the case for a long time. And by the way, that's not for lack of trying. They've invested a lot in the defense over the years, and it's still pretty bad. So, I don't know what that means for the long term for like what they're going to do on defense, because they have sunk a lot of capital and trades and draft picks into the defense, and it's still been pretty bad year in and year out for like 6 years now. So, that is something to be figured out down the line. But at the same time, I do think he's a really good coach at just helping his team be competitive year in and year out.
I think one of the things with Seattle, particularly last year, was they draft 2 rookie tackles who step in and play really well, and they have Tariq Woolen at corner, who's really good. And then this year, They were one of the winners of day one of the draft when they get Devin Witherspoon at 5 overall and they get Jackson Smith and Jigba at 20 overall. So with those two rookies this year, you're deep into the draft. You scout all these guys pre-draft. Have those guys in Witherspoon and Smith and Jigba in particular, have they been as good as you thought they'd be? Better, worse? Where do you land on those two guys?
I think
most of the way through the rookie
Witherspoon
years?
has been, I don't know if better than I expected is the right way to put it, because I really liked him. But he's been exactly as advertised in a good way. You know what I mean? Like, he's been a huge impact player for them. He's like an incredible tackler. He hits hard. Like, he's not very big. He's like 100 and whatever, 80 pounds or something.
Yeah.
And he hits like bricks. He's really instinctive. He's always around the ball. He's just one of those guys that is a true, I think, like force multiplier on defense when he's playing well. He like makes everybody around him better, kind of deal. So I'm very bullish on what he can be, both short term and long term. He could be like a big impact player for them as long as he can stay healthy. I would say Smith and Jigba's probably, if you ask Seahawks fans in their heart of hearts, he's been a little disappointing. And part of that is because he's been playing for most of the season. I think over the last couple of games, he's been playing like a little bit more of a real receiver role, like running routes downfield and getting targeted downfield. But like, I think over the first like 6 or 7 weeks, he had like a negative ADOT. Like, his average depth of target was like legitimately at the line of scrimmage. They were just running screens for him. It was like very bizarre. And part of that was that it was like essentially DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett are the established starters, and they were running a ton of 12 personnel. That was like what they were best at. And so Smith and Jigba was more or less just like a bit player that would come in and run screens or whatever, you know, and kind of like playing his role, but he wasn't really a huge part of their offense early on. And so I don't know. To me, he's been very impressive the last few games, and I think he's still on the right track. I'm still hopeful that he'll be a huge impact player for them. But at the same time, I would say people were kind of starting to get nervous. I was getting a lot of texts like, should we have taken, Zay Flowers? Like, maybe this was not the right pick. Maybe he's actually kind of just a system, like a product of the system, product of CJ Stroud. There was like a lot of, I think, consternation, at least for part of the season here. So I'd say he's been below expectation, but I'm still pretty optimistic of him long term.
Chris, you're an Ohio State guy. How does that make you feel?
I think you just need some time.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
I think not every rookie receiver can come in and ball right away, especially when there are other receivers that are going to get a lot of targets.
My take and my response to the people that have been worried about him is like, he was not really drafted to be a this year player. Like, they still have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and they still love playing 12 personnel and two tight end sets where they're running the ball. They can do the things on play action. They can do all this stuff in 12 personnel that they're really good at. And so to me, he was more of in year one, he's an insurance, he's a piece of insurance in case one of these guys, one of Lockett or Metcalf, gets hurt, then he can go in and be like a go-to guy in their offense. But he to me has always been sort of more of like a 2024 and on guy.
That makes sense.
Danny, what reasons for optimism should the Seahawks have going into Sunday's game? Is it just something like catch the 49ers sleeping, Niners turn the ball over? Like, what are there? I don't know what has to go right for Seattle to win, or how optimistic are you that Seattle can come in and hit the 49ers in the mouth on Sunday?
Well, like the Niners are the biggest buzzsaw team in the NFL. This is what I've been saying, the buzzsaw term. To me, that's just like, man, it is a lot of things have to go wrong for the 49ers to lose, I feel like. And because they just wear on you. They have so much talent on both sides of the ball, and they can create turnovers on defense. They have a great pass rush. They have really good, playmakers in the middle and on the outside. And it's just like, man, they're just they can just beat you in so many ways. It's truly like a buzzsaw type team, and they're really hot right now. Obviously, I think the only hope that I would have is this a big letdown game after having a huge emotional revenge game win over the Eagles on the road. Come back and play at home against a team that they just destroyed a couple of weeks ago. I guess the hope would be there's some kind of letdown type thing. And that would be like, I think the main thing. The other end is like, the Seahawks and 49ers know each other. They played each other a lot. Like you said, it's like a long-standing rivalry. And division games are always a little unpredictable. So I'm not writing off the Seahawks completely. On paper, this is clearly a much better 49ers team. And I don't expect the Seahawks to win, but that doesn't mean they can't win. You know what I mean?
I will say it does feel like it's been like there was a long time where every 49ers Seahawks game just felt really weird. And maybe that was just every Seahawks game. We haven't had a really weird
Yeah, that's true.
Haven't had a really weird Niners Seahawks game in a minute. So maybe
Let's get weird. Let's get weird.
We need a special teams touchdown.
Yeah, hell yeah.
A fake
need
punt.
one of those.
I could see the Seahawks. That's actually a great point. Like I could see the Seahawks kind of pulling out all the stops in this one. Fake punt, fake field goal, something like that.
Is Travis Homer still on the team?
No, he's in Chicago.
He's with the Bears.
Oh,
now.
He's in Chicago too.
Yeah.
DJ Dallas. All the Seahawks are hurt right now, by the way.
I was gonna say what's the deal with I just got their practice report. Let's see.
Yeah, is Walker practicing yet? Because that would be helpful.
Oh, Walker was limited. Walker and Zach Charbonnet both limited.
That's good because they did not practice yesterday.
Correct.
So that's encouraging. I would say, yeah, like it would certainly help if the Seahawks are at full strength, especially at running back. Because I think Kenneth Walker, is one of the Seahawks' most dynamic playmakers. He's the type of guy who can make a touchdown or create a touchdown from anywhere on the field. I think Seahawks fans get frustrated with him because his just sort of point A to point B, doing what he's supposed to do and hitting the hole directly. I think people get frustrated that he doesn't necessarily do that as consistently as other running backs. But I love him because he's like capable of creating on his own, making people miss, breaking tackles, and scoring 60-yard touchdowns. So it's kind of like, there's a little bit of a balance there, but it would be great to have him back for this game because I think they're going to need that type of like big play ability to really, basically steal one from the 49ers this week.
I have a really quick question that's separate from this. I should have asked this earlier for like conversation flow, but I didn't. It's poor podcasting by me.
That's all right.
It's cool. It's cool. We'll fix it in post. Has the addition of Christian McCaffrey changed your mind at all on Kyle Shanahan from a fantasy football standpoint? Like you're out on Kyle, like you're in on Kyle Shanahan, but out on him as like a fantasy football.
Yeah.
What am I trying to say? Like his effect on fantasy football.
Right.
Are you back in?
This year more so than I have been in the past, for sure. Like in the past, as you've alluding to, like I hated Kyle Shanahan because it was like so unpredictable with who's going to be scoring fantasy points. Obviously, from my point of view, I'm trying to like give people advice on fantasy, and it's like every week something new with this guy, and it's like putting Ayuk on the bench. It's like he's playing favorites, like all this stuff. It's just like really annoying. But this year, I would say certainly with Christian McCaffrey, like the volume is the biggest thing you can take to the bank in fantasy right now is like Christian McCaffrey is going to play like 95% of the snaps, even if they're winning by 30, which of course probably not the best idea, but we appreciate it in fantasy land. And then I would say like this might be more of a Purdy thing than Shanahan, but I would say there's like a better distribution and consistency with like Kittle, Ayuk, and Debo are all kind of getting their looks. Like maybe he just knows where his bread is buttered and he's making sure to get everybody looks and past everybody and like, doing the good thing that quarterbacks do, which is like making everybody happy. Maybe there's some of that, or maybe it's partly Shanahan. I don't know, but like it does feel like, or maybe it's just the fact that the 49ers are an absolute freaking buzzsaw that blow everybody out. But there's just a lot more consistency and like you can use these guys more confidently than you ever have, it feels like, in the past. Like Kittle last year, the year before, was just like all over the map. I never know whether to start Kittle, even though he's like one of the best players in the NFL. It's like in fantasy, it's like he might have 0 targets in this game and he's still blocking his ass off. But but this year, I don't have the animosity towards Shanahan I used to in terms of like the fantasy point of view. Obviously, I've always believed he's a really good coach.
Sure.
I remember like going into 2021, like Trey Sermon had some off-season momentum.
Yeah.
Right. And then week 1, he's inactive. It's like, wait, what?
And Elijah Mitchell lights it up.
It's like,
dude,
okay,
you can't, I can't even tell you how excited I was for Ty Davis Price to get released from the 49ers. I was like, yes, he's free. And then no one claimed him. I'm like,
then he resigns on the practice squad.
So he's stuck with the 49ers. Not that I even like think he's that great. I just want to see, him get a chance. You know what I mean? but now he's just buried forever.
It's a tough scene for Elijah Mitchell that he got
Yeah.
exactly 3 carries in Philadelphia, and he's like, I'm sore, and he hasn't practiced the first 2 days this week.
He's had knee issues for a while.
It's like Rashad Penny for us. Like, great, like very explosive, good player, just unreliable, can't stay healthy.
Yeah. Danny, I wanted to ask you about a prediction for Sunday, but instead of like a score and a win or loss prediction, do you have just like some random Seahawks minutia that you feel like is going to happen on Sunday? Something that you can predict?
Well, I'll put it this way. I'm very interested to look at the DK Metcalf Travarius Ward matchup because like last time they played 2 weeks ago, Ward sort of shut down DK Metcalf, and Metcalf even came out and said like, I got nothing but respect for that guy. Like, which I thought was pretty cool. And, cause like DK Metcalf is an instigator. He's like, like to his detriment,
just kind of shitty,
right? To his detriment. Sometimes he's like, plays really physical and like after the whistle, and there he gets a lot of like personal fouls, and it drives Seahawks fans kind of crazy.
I think that's true about his pre-draft combine meeting with the 49ers also.
Oh, really?
You've heard that? I don't know if
I have
you've
not.
heard that story. Yeah,
no.
I don't have specifics, but all I can say, I guess, on the record would be that it didn't go well when DK Metcalf met with Kyle Shanahan.
That's hilarious.
In Indy in 2021, I think, whenever that was.
Yeah.
Or 2020. Yeah. Well,
I'm kind of glad that he's not on the 49ers, because then it would just be like ridiculously good. But yeah, I think I'm going to be watching that matchup. I think DK Metcalf is going to have a better game this time than he did last time. I kind of have like this hunch that the Seahawks offense is going to play well. Or at least better than they did last time, but it's not going to be enough. That's kind of like how I see the game going.
I agree.
Yeah.
I took the over 46.5.
There you go. I like that.
DK Metcalf is in year 5.
Yeah. So, not 2019, I think.
Yeah.
He was the same year as AJ Brown, I want to say. Was it the Debo year?
Yeah, that was 2019.
Yeah, so they took Debo instead of DK.
And,
well, I guess that probably
our
worked
guy
out.
from ASU, N'Keal Harry, went 32nd.
Yeah. And then Ayuk was 2020.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Man, 49ers are good at identifying offensive talent. So
sometimes
that's annoying.
Yeah, sometimes.
Other than like their round 3 running backs. Yeah.
Yeah, they're good rounds 1 and 2. No, not even round. They drafted Dante Pettis in the 2nd round.
Yeah.
Two spots ahead of Christian
annoying
Kirk.
Fantasy thing. Yeah.
Hey, the funniest thing is when you go look at the Niners 3rd round picks under Shanahan and Lynch, it's just ass. It's like CJ Beathard and like Akello Witherspoon is one of the best ones, and it's Trey Sermon and freaking Danny
Gray.
Get Fred
Warner.
No, I know that
Danny Gray.
That was the punchline. And then you look and there's like, oh, there's Fred Warner. Like, okay, fine. I guess they're fine in the 3rd round.
Yeah.
Nuts. Anyways.
That's the story with the Seahawks too, I think, is like a lot of, actually the 49ers have done this too. A lot of big misses early, but then they seem to like fill out their roster with like elite guys that they find like diamonds in the rough that they can coach up, or these guys fell for whatever reason. Obviously the Seahawks have not been able to recreate some of their Legion of Boom stuff that they did, but obviously those days, like there was like a lot of mid to late round guys that were like coming in and like playing huge amounts of snaps for them. And then they threw away some 1st round picks on some really stupid stuff. So yeah.
Niners also got super lucky in 2018 when Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt, and then they lucked into the number 2 pick to get Nick Bosa.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And also they got a little bit lucky in the sense, now looking back, we can say they got lucky that Arizona didn't take Bosa and took Kyler that year.
If you really, this is like, if I was a GM of a team, I'm going to be like, the fans would probably hate me, but like being really good and then really bad the next year, if alternating years, you could probably build like a really legit team. Just have like one or two bad, like top of the draft years, get some elite like playmakers, and you're set.
Yeah.
Then of course you have to pick the right guys. Of course, that's part of it. But
yeah, but if you just have 100% hit rate, you'll be fine. I don't know why more teams don't just do that.
True.
Danny Kelly covering the NFL for the Ringer. Ringer Fantasy Football Show is the podcast. On that same feed is the Ringer NFL Draft Show. It is super fun. Even when I didn't have a fantasy team, I listen to it every time. It is a very enjoyable listen. DK, thanks, man.
Thank you.